What's up, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Learning from the Pros. You guys are in for a treat. Today's guest is going to be sharing his tips on thought leader ads and how to make them work for your SaaS company. Jonathan Bland is joining me today. He is the co-founder of OmniLab. They are a demand gen agency for Series A to C B2B SaaS startups, and he is a LinkedIn legend himself with all this great content on ads and SaaS. So, Jonathan, welcome.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, lovely intro. Well said.
So why don't we kick off just a quick like intro on yourself and your background around LinkedIn thought leadership ads and like kind of your experience around ads in general.
Well, my background's kind of interesting to guys get the quick highlight reel. I actually started in sales. I was selling security software to the U.S. government for a while, and then I moved into business intelligence, worked for a number of different SaaS companies, and then I got into early stage SaaS. And I think anyone that's an early stage SaaS always gets this. I mean, you've been there with metadata. You've got a title. Your title doesn't mean a whole lot. You're always doing like 1,000 things a Sunday. And so that was kind of me. And I was jumping, I think I worked at 3 or 4 SaaS startups in-house and, what looked like sales roles, but we were doing everything. And so I was doing stuff with Google Ads. I was calling people from an SDR perspective. I was writing workflows in HubSpot to make sure that our email nurtures were working properly and everything else in between. And so anyway, little by little, fast forward, some years forward, we started OmniLab and now been just doing paid ad creative and conversion tracking analytics. So.
Nice. Yeah, and you guys are working with some awesome brands. Like, so you guys are doing some great stuff. Like, looking here, you
Yeah.
guys are working with like Drata, Turtle, like some really awesome companies. And you guys take
Yeah.
a unique approach in terms of like more demand gen than traditional lead gen and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think those terms are getting so murky. I think you'd probably agree too. I mean, I think there's so much divide
Yeah.
right now between those. But I think the way that we always think about it is there's always a balance between short term and long term types of campaigns. And so I think that most agencies, or certainly many, have very much a short term kind of focus, and even marketing teams to a degree too, given the pressure they have from VCs or the CEO to deliver results today. Now we need it. Put the $100 gift card on everything. Go run a bunch of Google ads, go do whatever. And so this type of thing happens all the time. But I think it's so important, and I know you would agree with this, is that there's so many people that are still out of market that have no clue what we do, how we do it. And we have not made ourselves differentiated in the minds of the customers with aligning with some of the key buying triggers, where the academic term would be category entry points. And so I think we need to kind of sometimes take a step back and say, well, wait a minute, like we can't have all of our ads geared towards bottom of the funnel type activities. Sometimes we need to take a step back and say, all right, well, let's just educate the market on exactly what we do and how we do it first, so that when they do have a need and they do pull themselves in market, then they're thinking about us. And so I think that's been kind of the basis of how we think about things. And of course, for your bottom of the funnel direct response campaigns, huge focus on pipeline revenue, obviously quality leads, whatever lead is for you in terms of definition, because everyone defines it differently, and making sure that, if we've got, keyword that's performing really well, CPA is low, and we're getting a lot of conversions, that ultimately we're like, hey, cool, yeah, let's spend another $100,000 on that. No. Let's actually go into the CRM and understand, well, wait a minute, none of these are actually progressing along the funnel. None of them have moved into SQL. Sales team is bitching about them, and so we just want to avoid those types of things in your more direct response type of campaigns. But yeah, 100%.
Yeah, 100%. And now there's been this emergence in the LinkedIn world with thought leader ads, where
Yeah.
it's this really unique ad format that you can apply it in so many different ways. And there's been so much buzz on thought leadership ads from people like yourself, me, other folks in the space that are like talking about like the results they've seen. So now I think there's a lot of misunderstandings around thought leadership ads and how to kind of maximize its utility and where it fits along
Yeah.
somebody's paid media strategy. So why don't you kick us off with your first tip for somebody to actually get success with thought leader ads?
Well, I think the first tip has to be, well, what are they? And let's make sure that everyone's on the same page there. I think nearly everyone has heard of thought leader ads. Certainly not everyone's running them though, but they're really just sponsored organic posts. That's it, nice and simple. And you now have the ability to also do employee-based sponsorship as well as non-employee, which is really powerful from an influencer perspective, or partners or VCs. Current customers can now write things about you, and you can take those posts and promote them directly to your audience. So I think the biggest thing is that what's really changed is that, for a while, organic LinkedIn's been huge for a while for a lot of people, at least that are in that world, although I think it's still a very small community. I'm sure you would agree. But now we've got the ability to say, hey, wait a minute. We used to be at the helm of waiting for the algorithm to get us in front of the right audience. Now we can actually control that and say, hey, let's make sure that that organic post that already has a really good engagement rate, we're getting the right people engaging with our post. Let's now get that in front of the exact right people we want to hit. And so you might have a target account list, or you might have a firmographic ICP criteria that's built into that. But the goal is to say, great, now we can take that organic post and make sure it's guaranteed. So we're not just getting a bunch of freelancers, consultants, people like you and me
Yep.
that I think are a lot more active sometimes on LinkedIn than your regular ICP.
Yeah, totally. One thing I find myself often reminding people is like thought leader ads are an ad format. They are not a strategy.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
And it's insane how like there's so much, like you mentioned earlier, like language is getting murky and like people are losing between the lines and all this stuff, and it's essentially that, right? So it's you're taking a post that already exists from someone, right, and then
Yeah.
you are promoting it and you're guaranteeing distribution against that post, which has the
Right.
benefit of being native to the platform.
And to your point on that, I mean, yeah, it's an ad format. It's 100% not a strategy. It's still funny to me though that so often I'll talk with, the VP of marketing or head of demand gen. It's like, what's your marketing strategy? Well, let me walk you through it. We do Google Ads, cold email, and pick another channel. And it's like, okay, that's great. Those are awesome channels, but what's the strategy behind it, right? And I think that even bubbles up more towards targeting, positioning, messaging, segmentation, like those types of things are really kind of like front of mind to me for like what the question really should be is we need to answer those types of things. And then the format thought leader ad will come in. The next thing
Mm-hmm.
to kind of think about too, that I think a lot of people is just a general tip I need to consider with thought leader ads is we don't want to have anything that's too far away from the core product. And so the thought leader ad should really focus on, it doesn't have to be a pitch and it doesn't have to be end with get a demo, but it needs to have a core dotted line back to the product. And so that could be a situation where, at OmniLab, maybe I'm expressing the narrative or our general POV on the way to run Google Ads. And the reason I would talk about that and not put get a demo or do anything else is because then people know at least where we stand or where I stand on how to run Google Ads X way. And you may agree with it or you may disagree with it. Doesn't matter. The point is that I've put my foot in the sand and said, hey, cool, this is what I'm going to do. And so I think that's where we need to make sure that all content, anytime we write something in terms of a post, the content that we actually promote is the stuff that has a core dotted line back to the product, not the stuff that's like the fluffy, I don't know, I got a new job or I ate this or here's a selfie of me at the beach or anything
Yeah.
related to that. I think everyone probably gets that, right? But that's a big thing. So I'll stop myself there real quick.
That is, oh my God, I wish I had like a stream board that I could like do emojis in real time to things people say. That
Yeah.
is such a big one. I can't tell you the amount of accounts and that I've been like looking at where they've been running ungated content for the last 6 months and their pipeline has been like on a negative decline for the past. Like it's just from the moment they
Right.
made the shift, you just see a negative correlation. And oftentimes it's not because the strategy is flawed, it's because the inputs are wrong. And all the
Right.
content that they're promoting has no connection to the core product.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like the classic example of like they might love you, which is better than you're creating all this content and it doesn't resonate and you're not building that affinity. But at the very minimum, it's like they love you and they're like, oh, I love that brand, but they actually don't know really what you do. Like for example, I know the folks at Cognism well, and I know they
Yeah.
struggle with this early on, where like they created such a brand and like a movement, and everyone like really loves their content, but then they didn't really know the data sources that they provide and like how
Mhm.
they provide this high quality data, and there was like that disconnect. And like fast forward
Mhm.
to today, they've solved that, but that was like a classic example of that.
Totally. And I think the other thing to say, just to add to that, is that so dotted line back to the product, but I mean, the content, like any piece of content, should deliver value. Now, what is value? Value is defined by each person differently, right? Like for you, like you've been doing paid ads for a while. If I wrote a post on these are the two bid strategies for LinkedIn, you'd be like, duh, man, I've been doing this for years. And so you probably wouldn't find that post that valuable. And so
Mhm.
I think the thing is that we need to make sure that when we're writing, we're writing something that ideally applies to a large group of people that are going to get some good value from it, not necessarily to the 5%. You might be in that, kind of upper echelon of people that already know paid really well. And so that means that we want to think about content that we might even charge for is an easy way to kind of think about this, And if I think of, hey, what's something I could do? For example, I did this with Revenue Hero the other day. I just picked them out of completely random and picked Revenue Hero and decided to just put together some thoughts on the keywords that I would put together for a handful of non-brand campaigns and a competitor campaign. And I put that in a visual, and then I wrote a post about it on how I'd kind of organize the campaign, what the structure would look like, et cetera. That's something that someone in most cases will pay an agency to do, is to come up with at least, a bigger portion of that, clearly, right? But I just gave it away and say, hey, here you go. Like, take a look. It's not a complete plan. And by the way, I haven't audited your account. I don't know all the context, but here's how I think about it. And so that's a services example, but you can do this type of thing with all sorts of B2B SaaS companies. It doesn't have to be a services type example. And so it could be something related to calling out a company like, let's use interactive demos. So like Natalie at Nevadic, she could literally go in and say, hey, cool, for Cognizant, I'm going to go build out a little easy interactive demo by just looking at their website. And she might go through their website and create a tour off their website because maybe she doesn't have access to the actual product. And she could really create that, like, look how easy this is. Like, if you wanted to give someone a really cool walkthrough, it's as easy as this. Here's a screenshot, here's a couple of notes, so on and so forth. And then she could post that out, and they could do that at scale with key target accounts. Yeah. So anyway, I'll stop myself there, but I mean, another huge thing with just thinking about like the type of content you're creating.
This is a big one. Just to like triple click on this, because the trap that I'm seeing people fall into is they're like, it's like the Spider-Man reference, with great power comes great responsibility. Like, now they have this great power that they can take these posts that are from an individual at their company or a customer. Like, there's different ways but you can take an organic post from an individual, and you've been given this great power, and they're just kind of like going crazy, and they're just promoting whatever they have, and they're not being intentional about what is actually being offered in that post. So to your point, if it's like you've been given this great ability, this great power that's like still such untapped opportunity, but don't delude yourself. Like, the same principles still apply here, and you should frame yourself. I love how you framed it. Create content people are willing to pay for, right? That you can charge them for. In the example 100%. You did with Revenue Hero or Nevadic with the interactive demos. And it's amazing how just getting creative on the offer can go so far. Like, that's something that we're seeing consistently across the board, like in paid media in 2024 and beyond. We're seeing that optimizing at the channel level and like the channel tactics are becoming more and more less effective in terms of return on effort. And we're finding much more gains when we spend time actually thinking about the offer that we're presenting in the first place. Like, one small tactical thing to add on to what you're saying to make your offers more appealing, so like something people would charge for, is like, think about the offers you've already created in the past, and can you bundle them together in a certain way and then give them away? It'll increase the perceived value and just dramatically improve the response rates, the engagement rates, conversion rates, whatever the thing might be, and obviously like get more bang for your buck.
Yeah, I mean, it always comes back to the content. I mean, at the end of the day, you could turn every single dial inside LinkedIn or whatever the channel we're talking about. If the content is not good, or the messaging is not clear and succinct and aligns with what the audience is looking for, it does not matter what you do. You're out of options. So I always like to look at some point, if we got targeting right, our general setup and settings are generally set up the right way based on best practices. We really do need to go to your point about offer, content, messaging, move to those things, because those are going to be the bigger swinging things that really get either better engagement, CTR, conversions, whatever the goal is for the campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So moving on to the next tip, I've got here tip number 4 so far. Cool. What do you have anything planned?
Yeah, so I've got another one for you. So here's another one that I think commonly, I don't know if we call this 4. I'll kind of keep this one simple so we can get to 10 here. But adding a premium CTA at the top of your headline, so you can just go into your profile and add a CTA. And the reason you do that is it just gives people a clear way to get back to somewhere, right? Whether that be your website or signing up for a newsletter, or forget all the other CTAs. To be honest, I use view my newsletter, sign up for my newsletter, whatever the CTA says, because, I'm just trying to continue to build my own audience outside of, rented channel like LinkedIn. And so people like what they see, they like the content. I generally reuse and repurpose all the same content on LinkedIn and go deeper in my newsletter. But when you're running thought leader ads, a great way to kind of give people somewhere to go, to your point back about the offers, if you do have a newsletter or if you have some additional content on your website that might be interesting to look into, give them somewhere to go after that. Or maybe it's a situation where, hey, cool, I'm ready, I'm in market, and I'm looking for a way to move forward. Just make that easy. Now you can do with that CTA. You can also add a link in and just go ahead and edit the post, because at this point, once organic's taken its course over the last, usually 2, 3, 4 days, your organic post is kind of done. Unless it's gone completely viral, then maybe it'll continue to
Yep.
last for a few weeks. And so by that point, you can add a link in the bottom and just say, hey, if you're interested in learning more, or if you happen to be in market, or if you want to access this resource or whatever, just throw that link in the body. That way, again, gives them some place to go, gives you a little bit more attribution around running thought leader ads. So those would be two things in terms of, CTA plus link in the post, something we
Yeah.
do pretty much with all of our thought leader ads.
I love that. Just to clarify, the premium CTA is like that CTA that's underneath someone's job title and like where their profile picture in the feed, right? So they can just click on that
Correct.
link in the feed. How does somebody get access to that premium CTA if they're not familiar with it?
So you definitely have to pay for LinkedIn. You have to be, I think, what they call, I don't know what the exact definition. I've had it for so long, professional sales navigator or something like that. You've got to
Okay.
have the paid version to have the premium CTA. So that's the only prereq. Once you have that, it's as easy as going to add a profile, and we can put some instructions in the notes or something for people. And then you'll just go ahead and add the CTA. And then there's a handful of preset CTA buttons, so you don't have any customization there. Some people will also do the CTA on their app, so you can do a customized link on your profile. So when people go to your personal
Mm-hmm.
profile link, you could do it that way. I just like to have it within the feed. That way, for people that aren't going directly to my profile, it's just like cool. Like the guy has a newsletter. I didn't
Yeah.
know about that. Now you know, and you don't necessarily have to navigate all the way to my personal profile to do it. So it's
I'm
something
such
we
a
tell our clients.
cheapo. I'm such
Yeah,
a cheapo. I don't even have LinkedIn Premium. I should
very
totally
good.
do that. Yeah, and then you can have the
Yeah,
link
yeah.
in the feed. That makes perfect
I don't
sense.
even know how much it costs now, to be honest. I've had it for years and years. I think at one point it was like $50 a month or something. So we're not talking about huge bones. Maybe it's more now. I'm not even sure. I think I've been grandfathered in like 4 or 5 years ago or something.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great
So
tip. I'm curious, Jonathan, have you done anything around the selection of who the thought leader post is coming from, and kind of any insights around that?
yeah, 100%. What's really interesting. So we've been running thought leader ads for forever, and for a lot of our clients too. We see the same type of behavior. But I'll speak for OmniLabs real quick, and then I'll mention a client or two. We actually see engagement be the highest on non-employee based campaigns. So we started this influencer campaign, essentially is what we call it. And so, for example, we had Natalie, we did an audit for Novatic, and we kind of looked over their account, did a huge thing, built out a media plan, campaign strategy, the whole 9 yards. And then she was just nice enough to post something organically. And I saw it. I was like, oh, that's great. Like, thanks for saying all those nice things. Do you mind if we promote this? We're running an influencer campaign and we're getting a whole bunch of people that we do great work for that seem to like us. We're going to get that into that campaign. And so we've just found that those perform much better. And again, I'm strictly looking at this not from a conversion direct response perspective. I'm strictly looking at this at how many people are engaging with this. And so that's what I'm using as a measure of success to understand, all right, cool. Are people liking this? Are they getting value from it, et cetera? And so that performs honestly better than any other post, even mine. Jason, my co-founder, we've got a lot of his posts promoted as well. And same thing goes for a lot of our clients in some cases. I think the key always with the influence ones is that clearly they need to be some type of person with an audience, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
Natalie, I think, is pretty well known in the B2B marketing space. And so her name carries a little bit of weight and people are very familiar with her brand. And so I think if you can get someone like that and partner up with them, whether it be through a content collaboration or offering them something of value like an audit assessment, build out a strategy for them, or whatever it is that would make sense for the specific brand, those types of things work really well. So stop myself there, but
I,
that's one.
yeah, I love that. A good example of this also that I saw in the LinkedIn wilds is from Optio. So I'm seeing
Yeah,
a bunch of their ads in my feed, and it's
totally.
just like all these influencers that they've partnered with. And in this
Yeah.
case, I think they're like sponsored partnerships. So they reached out to these influencers. I'm assuming they paid them some money, and they're posting on the behalf of Optio, and then they're taking that post and now they're using all of that as like this first touch to get people indoctrinated into the brand from like other people's perspectives, and not just anybody, like people with reputation in the ad world.
Right. And for SaaS brands listening, I mean, I think Clay is a great example of this, like Optio as well. They've built literally a creator program. It's on their website. I think it might be like Clay/creator or something. But the program uses thought leader ads as a way to promote the people that are creating awesome content on how they use Clay. It's like literally the most beautiful thing. I mean, it's not going to work for every single type of brand, but in the way that Clay is going to market right now, they are absolutely killing it. And so now that they've got all these people that are excited about not only making money off of Clay by selling their services, they're also literally saying, hey, we're going to help promote you and get your name out there, which guess what? Gets Clay's name out there too. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. Both people win. They get more engagement on their post. They get more people reaching out about XYZ workflow they've created in Clay. And then Clay, of course, gets a lot of brand awareness from it and people talking about them. So literally,
Yeah,
it's an incredible program. I love Clay. I mean, they've done an awesome
I
job.
completely agree. It's a masterclass. Like in taking what we're talking about right now to like the 10th degree. I think totally.
Yeah,
That's like,
yeah,
yeah. And there's so many other benefits outside of just the thought leadership ad format, right? That
yeah.
produces.
Yeah, so there's one other thing that kind of goes in relation back to the premium CTA. Is just another kind of tip and thing that we always talk. We've got a whole entire like SOP on this that we usually give most of our clients. And so the other thing people forget about is just optimizing your actual LinkedIn profile. And so I
Mm,
think now when you've moved into the world of thought leader ads, like now your profile starts to become the landing page. And so I really just tell people like your profile now is the landing page. Sure, they may click the premium CTA. Sure, they may see the company you work with and go direct. I mean, all those things are going to happen just like they do with ads. But now you start to think about your LinkedIn profile being a place of conversion or a place of getting more information about your company. And I don't know how you want to break up all these tips, but there's a whole lot of different things in here. And we can maybe break them up to get to 10. But you got your banner, number one, right? Just going from top to
mm-hmm.
bottom. Banner's key. Make sure that we kind of lead either with some type of outcome, capability messaging, basically just kind of what you do at a high level. Mine actually needs to be updated. So I don't even, I'm not sure it's a huge point of example right here. I want to get a little more clear with the headlines, some social proof, some other things like that. So we're working on that. But banner, really, really important. And then obviously, photo that's up to date, looks like you. So when people actually talk to you, you look like who you are. If you've got a color, primary brand color, use that as the background. That way it just kind of, again, stays on brand when they see you, makes it stand out a little bit more. We use pink. And so there's not a lot of brands
Yep.
right now, though more and more seemingly are using pink. But that kind of makes it stand out. Then you go a little bit below her. I mean, clearly like headline, very clear of what you do. It doesn't have to be like I help brands do XYZ, but you can do that route. We just do, I think mine says paid media for B2B SaaS or something like that. Just kind of like clearly saying like, this is the category we play in. This is who we're for. That simple.
Mm-hmm.
That way people continue to see that over and over again. Same thing for any SaaS brand, could be interactive demos for B2B SaaS, just again, using the interactive demo category. Then below that, then you've got the about us or the about section in LinkedIn, and so that's where it shouldn't just be your list of accolades. Well, I'm a seasoned cybersecurity professional with 10 plus years, and I have achieved this and achieved that. Like that's great. That's great for looking for a job, but it's not so great for driving demand for your business. And so it can literally be as simple as maybe using the narrative, strategic narrative for your company. Like, what is that? Why do you
Mm.
guys exist? Like, what's the reason that you guys decided to start this company? Even if you're not the founder, it doesn't matter. The SME can still put something like that there. Or it may be something a little bit different in terms of your POV or how you approach things or some of the services you offer. Any social proof by names or testimonials or things like that are helpful to put in that section. Justin Welsh, I think, has a pretty solid bio. I used his a while back ago to write mine. I think mine's evolved since then, but another good thing that we tell all of our clients. And then, of course, like the obvious, make sure you actually have your title up to date and you work at the company
Mm-hmm.
you actually say you're going to work at. Otherwise, you couldn't even run the ad. Anyway, so there's a couple of things right there
Yeah,
for you.
I totally agree. There's one thing too that on your profile, I have it here that's awesome is those images from your posts, those
Yeah.
custom images on the bottom that you have, and like you've created
Oh,
like a
right.
custom
Yeah.
thumbnail. Those are
Totally.
also really cool too in terms of like driving your CTAs, like book a demo and some of the other posts you're highlighting.
That's a good point. Yeah, I forgot about the featured section. So if that's what
Mhm.
you were alluding to, or to add to that, but yeah, there's the featured section, and so yeah, if anyone wants to look me up, it is there right now, just Jonathan Bland. But yeah, I just have a little thumbnail that says, let us help you build your paid media strategy. I believe it says right now. And so that way it just keeps it nice and easy. It's the core CTA. It doesn't mean everyone's going to be ready to go and really want us as their agency. Maybe they want someone else. That's okay. A lot of people that are good out there. But that way, it just kind of gives them a clear way to go back to our website, take a look, and take the next step. So
Totally. Jonathan, I want to circle back for a second on something that you kind of touched on, and I really want to flush out because
sure.
this, if there's one thing that I think most folks like get the most anxiety about and over stress about and lose sleep over this, it's measurement. And how do you
Mm.
actually think about optimizing these thought leader ads and measuring
Yeah.
their effectiveness? So maybe this is like a two-part question. Let's start first with measuring thought leader ads. How do you think about it, right? So let's just run like a practical scenario. You've
Yeah.
identified 5 influencers you're going to partner with, and they've got good profiles, they're optimized, they're not catfishing on their pictures, they've got good headlines, the whole nine.
Right.
Now you're ready to launch the campaigns. The post itself is valuable, right? They're actually promoting something that is significant. How
Yeah.
do you now think about the success of those campaigns?
This is going to sound a little wild, I guess, because I know for everyone that's like a performance marketer or wants to go crazy on attribution, this may sound, I guess, a little bit controversial. But I mean, usually with those types of campaigns, we clearly are tracking conversions if they come in and someone, clicks the link and goes to the website and whatnot. But in this case, really measurement's all about, reach, number one, engagement, CTR. Those are the big things that we really look at, honestly. And so usually what we're doing is, even before that, maybe to take one step back before we get to full on measurement, is usually we're trying to de-risk even spending any money on thought leader ads by looking at the engagement rate off an organic post. And so usually if it's got anywhere between 2 and 3% is pretty solid. I mean, 3% plus would be great, but not everyone, has that much engagement on their post. And so we start there to then de-risk it. Then we actually promote the posts. And then what we'll do is essentially just kind of like on a 30-day rolling cycle, look at all the thought leader ads that are running, and based on the metrics I just mentioned, decide to rotate some in and out based on engagement where it is. And so sometimes you'll see a general fall off in engagement after time because people have seen it, especially if it's a smaller audience. Usually for us, we're trying to keep like bigger audiences, max reach, all to people that are in our ICP. And so we haven't even
Mm-hmm.
maxed out those campaigns. And so I'm not really too worried about changing up the creative all the time. I know the content resonated really, really well organically. I know it's still resonating, there. So that's one thing. Now, for the conversions, clearly you had in-channel conversion data. So we're looking at things like newsletters or newsletter signups or book of calls. For our clients, it's book a call or sign up, things like that. And then of course the sales team's asking how did they hear about you, and there's the form on the website with most of our clients that gives at least some amount of data because we have a cybersecurity company we're working with right now. And interestingly enough, the guy's name that we're promoting his post on is named Omar, and his name comes up all the time in that field. Omar's posts, Omar's posts, Omar's posts. Now, do we know it came directly from a thought leader ad? No, not necessarily. We don't know that. And so you can clearly, tie LinkedIn impressions to account data if you want to play that game, and use Hockey Stack or Dream Data and those guys. But in this case, really just looking to understand like, hey, when we're running thought leader ads for this guy like Omar, for example, are we seeing his name appear more often in that field? Are we getting some in-channel conversions? And then like most importantly, really, because we're targeting a lot of people that are not necessarily in market ready to buy, we're just trying to use it as an awareness type of strategy. We're looking at those
Mm-hmm.
reach, CTR, engagement. So that's really it. I mean, most people, I'd love to hear what you say on that. And maybe you've got a more scientific answer on that one, but that's how we really do it for the majority of the people we work with.
No, I
So
love it. I love the tip within the tip around like de-risking the thought leader post
yeah,
by looking at the organic engagement rates. And then I love the benchmark you gave, like between 2 and 3%. 3% is like on the high end
yeah,
if they have that, and then 2% on the low end. That's really awesome because that's super tactical for people that are definitely like more quant oriented,
sure,
or they
sure,
kind of need these like benchmarks and these frameworks
yeah,
to proceed. And then that's brilliant. And then the part around like reach, the engagement, the click through rate, same here, as well. The only thing that I would say adding on to it is like leading conversions are super helpful, because your
Mm-hmm.
primary conversion for sure in this case might be booking a demo, but that's the most difficult thing on the planet to do, right? Is to get somebody, especially cold,
Mm-hmm.
to just click
Yep.
through, book a demo. So by setting up micro conversions and these little leading signals, it can kind of help
Mm-hmm.
you visualize what's going on in terms of their experience with your brand. So for example, one really small one
I
is
love
an
that.
engaged visit. So somebody that
Mm-hmm.
scrolls at least 75% of the way through and stays for a minute on your site. Really small
Yep.
conversion piece, but now when you're optimizing your ads, and it's you're taking it a little bit further where it's like this thought leader post, yes, it's getting a
Mm-hmm.
better click through rate, but more importantly, it's like actually leading to more consumption,
Right.
which is what we're after,
I
and
love
then
that.
that's kind of
Yeah.
like the proxy.
I love that. I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, micro conversions are 100% a great strategy. I mean, especially in situations. I know we're talking about LinkedIn, but especially on Google in some cases when you've got really high CPCs and you're looking to get more data in the channel to understand, hey, what keywords are potentially driving the types of interactions we want. For example, to your point, time on page, or even I would add like other high intent pages on the website, pricing, the get a demo page, case studies, things like that. And you don't have to make this too complicated, but to your point, like the whole goal is just to get a handful more pieces of data into it. Cause, as you said, book a demo is the highest friction offer that you can lead with. I mean, it's literally asking someone to stop what they're doing, spend 30 to 60 minutes on some call with a salesperson to go in depth on a product demo that I guess they hope they get right. A lot of times you're not actually getting a demo on a demo, but
Yep.
that's for another podcast maybe. So
Yeah, 1,000%. And another one that I find like incredible as like a micro conversion for folks is form
yeah.
abandons. So somebody,
Yeah.
and it's so
Yeah.
easy to
Good one.
set up with Google Tag Manager. So somebody that starts filling out your
Yeah.
forms and then they stop, that's also like a great micro conversion. So now like the data starts to tell you a story of what's going on. And really like the way I think about it and the way I explain it's like really what we're after is like signs of life.
Mhm.
Okay, I launched this thing, and then now you're like crickets. What's happening, right? And like these are all little things that can give you that confidence in terms of like signs of life. Of like, oh, okay, wait a second, there's something going on here.
And I think those things are so important too, because I mean, the longer sales cycle you have and the higher ACV, it's not going to be a world where, well, we launched the thought leader ad campaign last month. Any conversions or pipeline from it? It's like, wait a minute here. We need to use some other metrics here. Yeah, they're not the ones that are always going to be as sexy to a CEO, but they're the ones that as marketers we have to utilize those, because otherwise you're going to get in a position where you're just going to kill all the good programs that are driving tons of demand and awareness. You're just not using the right metrics. And I think that's why a lot of people actually end all sorts of different channels. I mean, podcasts and the newsletter. How many leads did we get from the newsletter last month? I mean, stuff like that. These types of questions are
Yeah.
good ones. I mean, it's not to say we should just forgo measurement. Clearly, we should measure what we can measure. But we also just need to realize like there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes. And to your point, there are some leading indicators along the way that at least can tell us, hey, we're headed the right direction. This is the right content.
Hmm.
People are getting value from it. And we can look at the demographics report in LinkedIn and see that the right accounts, the right titles. This is a good thing. We've got really engaged accounts right here. So yeah, I think it's well said.
One of the quotes that I said in the recent Google Ad courses we launched was the number one killer of campaigns is poor expectations.
Yeah,
Nothing kills more campaigns than that, which is a great
totally.
segue to my next question, which is how do you frame expectations? Like, let's pretend I'm a new client, right? And I just started working
Yeah.
with you. I'm like, Jonathan, I'm super pumped. I love all your content on LinkedIn. You're incredible. I can't wait to work with your team. So we just raised a Series A, and we've got aggressive pipeline targets, and we need to go from 10 demos a month to 30. Classical
Right.
situation. How do you now set expectations with me in regards to how we're going to leverage thought leadership in our strategy to ultimately get my goal of demos?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, I think that the first place to start always is we need to do an assessment of how many demos are we getting today if they have an active thought leader ad campaign, so that whatever goal they've put in a spreadsheet based off of, hey, here's the next, growth goal we need to hit based off of what our VC says we need to hit, that it's based in some type of reality. right? And so that's kind of number one, right? So we need to just gut check, where are we today and where are we trying to get? And I think the big thing is, are we trying to get there with the same amount of budget, which is usually what everyone wants to do? Well, if we could just get to that goal, then we could definitely open up more budget. And the reality is it just doesn't work that way. Not to say, though, at the same time that it also is going to scale linearly. It's not a situation where, well, it looks like we're getting, I don't know, $500 a demo or something like that. Let's go ahead and put another $5,000 to get X amount more demos. I mean, it's not going to work that way either. So I think that's the big thing. You got to just look at historical data from the data that you can see, first and foremost. And that could be
Mm-hmm.
qualitative and quantitative. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Ideally, it's both. If you've got qualitative data coming in from the sales team and your marketing forms. The next thing I like to do, just as a game, though, with expectation setting around certain campaigns, is just to ask people, like, when you see posts on LinkedIn, what is your immediate reaction? What are some of the things that you do when you see that post? Because I think it's interesting and it frames up the thing for thought leader ads specifically, where people have this expectation now all of a sudden that they're spending money on thought leader ads, that demos and signups are going to start flying in immediately. And I'm sure they will, but directly attributed, maybe not. And so I think it comes back to thinking just like, how do we buy as humans and how do we interact with content? And most people will say to that question, oh, I don't know. I mean, I read the content, I kind of move on, or I don't know, maybe I skim it and it was interesting and I might leave a comment or a like on it, things like that. I'm like, okay, cool. So like what you're saying though, is that you're putting a lot of, you're engaging with it and you're just reading the content, but you're not taking action in a lot of cases. Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, okay, well, so if that's the case, then we really need to kind of think about the type of campaign that we're going to be running. And so it's literally going to be the same exact example as we just walked through. We're going to be taking your post, we're going to be promoting them and getting them out in front of your audience to people that are likely cold, that haven't heard of you before. And so what would you do in that situation if you saw a post and never heard of the company before? Would you immediately book a demo, do you think, or would you not? And the answer is always going to be, oh no, of course I wouldn't, not unless I had a big
Mm-hmm.
burning pain, or it was in market, or we budgeted for this thing, or whatever it may be. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, at least we're on the same page there. And then it comes back to saying, okay, well, then what metrics are we going to use? And then I think it comes back to your point, micro conversions, 100% all day long. We do a lot of that. Or using other just leading indicators in the channel to understand, hey, like, are we hitting the right people? Is the right audience engaging? Is the engagement good? Is it staying steady? Or is it maybe bad? And maybe we have the wrong targeting, or maybe we just need to change up the type of content that we're putting out there. It's just not that valuable. No one really cares. It's kind of like Me Too content, something maybe they wrote in Chat GPT, just called it a day. So
Mm-hmm.
I know those are some ideas and thoughts around setting expectations. So I guess the TLDR recap is historical review of the data that you have today, just to gut check where things are today versus the goal. That's one. And then just having a honest conversation and putting them in the position of, what if you saw this type of thing, or what if you consume this type of content? What would you do typically in that situation? I think that just gets people in the mindset, oh, right, yeah, I'm being a little unrealistic thinking that we're just going to throw up this campaign for the first month and get a whole bunch of people to drive in. I mean, we all want that, but got to set realistic expectations, back to your point.
Yeah, 100%. Just one final question here as we're at the top of the hour. Do you, for somebody listening to this, by the way, if you guys haven't gotten value so far, have you been listening? Like
Hopefully.
this has been a masterclass for sure. So like for somebody walking away from this, I feel like they're very clear on like what thought leader ads are, how they can deploy it, the nuances beyond the thought leader ad itself on the profile and the optimizations to be made there, grounding around expectations. For this last point, if somebody, they're ready to deploy this, do you have some sort of timeline that you usually like frame people around, or like, hey, it's going to take on average X days like to really invest in this program, or anything around that, or kind of how do you gear those conversations?
That one's tough because I don't think there's really a solid black and white answer. I mean, the way with some using some data would be to look at sales cycle lengths, to start there, and then use that as somewhat of a predictor of when we could expect results, because there's always a lag behind marketing spend. And so you could certainly look at that. But the reality is that, there's this messy middle where people are moving themselves in market and out of market that's just really hard to lock down. And so you could do exercises where you try to size the amount of people that are in market. And so maybe some of you have heard of the 95-5 rule. It's been, for whatever reason, going around and around and around on LinkedIn. think a lot of people don't really understand actually where it comes from, but it came from John Rawls back a handful of years. He's a professor at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. And so he basically came up with this heuristic to judge how many people are in market versus out of market. And so the idea is that if you know your inner category purchase time, right, like how often do you buy a category, then you can back into some very simple math to say, okay, we know that at any given time, based on the size of our ICP, the amount of accounts that are there, X amount of accounts are in market. And so
Mm-hmm.
between sales cycle and understanding how long it takes people to buy or go through a whole deal cycle with you, and using a little bit of information on how many people could actually be in market, you can get to an estimate of what it might look like in terms of conversions or accounts that you might be able to hit that are in market. That's about the best you can do, in my opinion. If anyone has a magic solution to this, I'd love to hear it. I don't think there is. I think all these things are used as guidelines and
Yep.
predictors of the future to some degree. The rest of it is again that messy middle. Google's think tank wrote a whole entire article, did a bunch of research on this. It's like what the article's called. If you type in Google messy middle, you'll find it. And there's a whole bunch of research on there that walks through this exact thing, where it's not a binary like put ad in, people move in market, and then they buy your stuff. It just doesn't work that way. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
sales cycle and that 95/5 rule, and trying to calculate that would be kind of two ways to get to an answer
Yeah,
there.
I think that was a perfect answer, because really what I wanted to get at for everyone and draw it out was like, there's so many factors here outside of your
It's
control,
crazy. So much.
and there is no silver bullet. And it's like, you're just to sum everything up, you're taking a format and you can apply this format into your strategy to reap,
Yeah.
better engagement rates, cost, et cetera, because it's so native to the platform. But all of these principles still apply, right? Like, you have your own
Yeah.
sales cycle lengths, you have your own constraints as a business, you have things that your audiences favor and they don't in terms of the content they respond to. So it's like keeping all this stuff into consideration when you do craft your strategy, and then you decide, hey, I'm going to use this as a thought leader post as a part of the greater whole and connect it all together.
Yeah, I think it's just on the one last point on this, and we can wrap. But I think the important thing with anything is you got to have the short term and the long term in mind. Clearly, everyone knows that. So the message of it just takes time, which a lot of people love to say on LinkedIn and marketers do. Sometimes I've even probably been guilty of saying it, I'm sure, at some point, isn't really a good message to someone who's spending tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, it just takes time, ain't going to cut it. So we can't say that. There has to be more of a connection back to either some of those leading indicators and how they affect downstream metrics, even if it's just correlation. Ideally, maybe you get in the world of causation using mixed modeling tools and stuff like that, but that's for much bigger companies in terms of
Mm-hmm.
the amount of data needed to do that type of thing. But I think with thought leader ads, the final point is thought leader ads are not, in my opinion, meant to be a direct response type of offer or motion, unless we're talking about something like a framework or a template or a guide or something like that you're giving away. The whole point of
Mm-hmm.
thought leader ads is to get your POV, your narrative, and how you do what you do out there in the world. So making sure that you connect the dots back to those key buying triggers or situations that people say, hey, I have a brand awareness problem. I need some help from OmniLab, or I have a lead quality issue. I'm getting lots of bad leads into my funnel. How do I potentially improve that? Those are situations that, agencies and certainly us want to come up and be top of mind for, so that we could potentially solve those things. And so the same thing is true for thought leader ads, and using those things as longer term brand plays where you've got a direct line of communication, because again, it's coming from you, like a person.
Mm-hmm.
It's not coming from your company anymore. So now you can have interactive conversations in the comments section. You can reach out to people on DMs. It's a very different type of format that requires a little bit of work. That was actually probably one point we should get into later on another podcast, with commenting and staying up on it. It's not like you just put out the post and call it a day, right? You got to stay
Mm-hmm.
with it. So
I love it. So many awesome tips. Just to do a quick recap for all the listeners, we started off talking about what thought leader ads are. Just remember, at the end of the day, it's a sponsored post. So you're taking somebody's organic content and you're guaranteeing distribution on the back of it by promoting it. Number two is you want to make sure the content that you are investing dollars in is that it connects to the product. Like, I love that reference. You want to draw the dotted line, like Jonathan said, from what is being said to the core product that you're selling. Number three is you want to create content that people would be willing to purchase, that you could charge money for. Like the quote I love to use here is like, just because it's free doesn't mean you don't have to sell it. You know, and I know this better than anyone, I think, after like creating AdConversion, having free courses taught by
Oh
legit
yeah,
practitioners. I cannot tell you, like, the number one thing is like people don't believe it's free, and it's like it takes
yeah.
so much work to get people to take action. So just because it's free doesn't mean you have to sell it. Create content people are willing to charge for. Add premium CTAs. Don't be cheap like me. Pay for the LinkedIn premium and add premium
Mhm.
CTAs so that you can take advantage of that additional traffic. The next one is to test influencer campaigns. Really lean into the non-employees if you have that at your disposal. It's very powerful. The next one was to optimize your LinkedIn profile. There's like 8 tips underneath this one big tip, so we'll have it in the show notes for you. But make sure your LinkedIn profile, I love the way you framed it, John. You said your LinkedIn profile is your landing page. And that's such a great frame of mind to have when you're thinking about the thought leader ad, because they can click on your profile, on your picture, and then dive into your profile and dive further and figure out who you are. The next one was around measurement. When you're thinking about optimizing these campaigns, really want to be focusing on is reach, engagement rates, self-reported attribution. Also, you want to make sure you're looking at the organic post and how is it doing between that 2 to 3% benchmark. I love that. And then make sure you're setting up micro conversions to give you these signs of life and understanding, okay, am I actually moving in the right direction? I always say,
Mm.
like, if you're not tracking, there's a very fine line between the difference between like an investor and a gambler.
Mm.
And in the context of ads, it's like when you don't have those micro conversions, you don't have a basic thesis of like what success looks like, then you're just gambling, right? And at the end of the day, like we're here to
Exactly.
invest and get returns on our investment. Next up, in terms of expectation, was to make sure you give yourself a reality check and align by reviewing the data on the quantitative and the qualitative side in terms of what you're hearing. And then I love this: put yourself in the buyer's shoes. It's amazing. Like what a like reality check. You know what I mean? Like, how do
Mm.
you use LinkedIn? How do you navigate and like interact with content that you come across? I think we lose that empathy for the user, and that's an incredible way to kind of give somebody some perspective. Like, you're not very different from them in terms of your behavior, right?
Mm.
And then finally, number 10, thought leader ads is the core strength of it. It's not a direct response format. It's really used for awareness and spreading your point of view and your narrative and allowing you to reach people and engage with them. Jonathan, this was awesome. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Easiest place is LinkedIn. Get me on LinkedIn, Jonathan Bland. Look me up, DM me. Happy to chat about thought leader ads in more detail. But that's
Sweet. Thank you so much for being here. If you guys aren't following the channel or subscribed, definitely make sure to connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and subscribe to us here on YouTube. We'll see you on the next one.